Hello, everybody.
I didn't see you there.
Welcome. Welcome to the GPU Audio live stream AMA. We're all excited to have you all here, and I am your host, Jess. Today we are joined with our guest, Cameron, or better known as Venus Theory. Also have Jonathan and Chris from GPU Audio.
Hello.
Cameron is best known as Venus Theory, makes noise videos and other stuff, and especially endeavors on YouTube where he's teaching his audience how to do something. He primarily works as a sound designer, musician, and content creator for top company brands and sound libraries, presets, tests new products, and also creating compelling content. So I'm sure a lot of you already know who he is. I've seen a lot of comments come in. People are really excited to hear from you today. Before we get started, though, two things. We do have a GPU giveaway today, so you want to hang on. We will have a question. In order for you guys to enter and win a GPU sticker, you will have to go onto the Discord and enter your answer there. First person.
We got T-shirts today too.
Oh, yeah, we do. We have T-shirts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
nice.
Super exciting.
So you guys will get T-shirts and stickers. So you'll just go over to the Discord channel. You can put your answers in there. The first one will get a T-shirt. Second one will get stickers. Both of you will get stickers, though. So let's jump right in. But before we do, Jonathan, do you have any updates for us?
Yeah. So in a striking update, Cameron has the best looking camera in all of collaborative web streaming of all time. Looks awesome. He's totally crushing us out. I'm like, now I need to go buy a new camera for our thing. Well, anyway, yeah, GPU Audio fam, welcome back, to another live stream. As far as company updates goes, pretty much everything from last week stands. We've had some really cool testing opportunities. Some people have been posting some really cool results about what's going on in your early access testing. So thank you for posting that. We had Sam Hawking just post like a really great graphic this morning. So just want to give a shout out to Sam for all of the great testing. Beta suite is coming up really, really soon. I know we keep saying that. We've been saying it for a while, but we went back to the drawing board, fix some things, change some things. And but really it's going to drop. So mid-September is when this is going to happen. Oh yeah, Jonathan is well dark. Basically what's going to be happening is sorry, you got me off track here and made me laugh. I should not read the comments. Everyone's always like, don't read the comments when you're trying to speak, John. But I can't help it because you guys are so amazing and so beautiful. So during the beta suite, we're actually going to be launching a sound to picture contest. This contest is awesome. It's going to be hosted through Headliner UK. Headliner magazine is an awesome, music industry and creator magazine out in the UK, obviously. And it's going to be a really cool contest. We got some amazing graphic IP. There's like a live action thing. There's an animatic. You guys are going to get a chance to score music and sound design to these things for the chance to get in front of a panel of amazing people from Amazon Studios, the game industry. We've got creators of CSI. We've got founding producers of Transformers and X-Men franchises, all going to be, joining us to basically come in and start coaching people on how to do sound to picture. And yeah, the contest will win. There's going to be a massive cash prize of thousands of dollars. There's going to be GPUs. There's going to be laptops. And I know Jess is looking at me like I'm breaking the news a little too early, but don't worry, because this is a live stream and there will be an official press release. So, just kind of get ready for that. I would say, if you guys have instruments and stuff and you're looking for a project to do, into the fall, this is going to be a really fun one. And it's going to be very public. So we're going to have a lot of fun with that. So please look out. September 16th right now is that date for when that's going to drop. So, drop something. And yes, Unborn Ideas, we usually full screen people when they're talking. So when Cameron's talking, we'll also full screen him. So he'll get equal treatment here. We're not, we're an equal opportunity full screener company. So thanks again for joining us. And yeah, Cameron, thanks for being here, man. I've had a good time.
Thanks, Cameron.
Hanging and chatting a little bit. It's been a lot of fun. We got to hang out at NAMM briefly and talk about how fucking tired we were from walking around.
Yeah, NAMM is just like the worst place on earth to like have a meeting, especially because we met on Sunday, right?
I think we met Sunday at the Coffee Bean.
Yeah, so it's like third day of NAMM after the whole show. It's like, let's meet for a coffee, and you're both just like, hey man. I was so tired, but I feel like there's no getting around that at NAMM. There's just this like NAMM brain thing.
Yeah, it's true. We, as people say, it's time to call the ambulance. I think I forgot that joke this year. But I did
Yeah,
get the
there's also
Namthrax.
Namnesia as well. That was another one.
Oh, that's a good one. Amnesia. That's when you forget, like, where did all these business cards come from? Like all these people that I met. But yeah, Namthrax was a big one this year. It was on the resurgence. Did you get COVID after Nam?
No. I was like one of the
Oh.
people that wore a mask, like partially at least. In some meetings I didn't, but like whenever I was going through the main floor, I was like, I feel like it's just a good idea, even if it's not COVID, just to like not get sick in general. Cause like every NAM, you get the flu or whatever's going around anyway. And this was like people from all over the world. So it's like, I don't know what, bus pole you've been licking or what, floors you've been scraping yourself across. So I wore a mask through like most of the main hall and like most meetings and stuff. So I made it out totally fine, which is funny because then I was, messaging people, texting people after, and they're like, yeah, our whole team is sick, or like our whole team got COVID. So I feel like I definitely lucked out.
That's good. Looks like Viral Beats did not luck out.
Yeah.
Viral Beats got COVID.
That was funny. Is like a lot of the people I was there talking to were like, I got COVID. So I came home and I was just like, shit. Just like waiting. And then, a week passes and I felt fine. And I was like, all right, well, cool. I guess I'm good then.
Gets out of the woods. Well, I'm going to, and then Jess has some stuff she wants to get into. She's got lots of questions for you. And just a reminder to the audience, everybody, feel free to post your questions now. And we'll dive into those later. All questions for Cameron, Venus Theory. This is all about him and his thoughts about, the pandemic. No, just kidding. Audio. And Jess is muted. Sorry. Hey, Jess.
I am muted. Thank you. Let's get into it. So we do have a bunch of questions for you, Cameron. If you guys have questions, please post them in the comments and we will get to them later in the stream. Just to start you off, Cameron, what was your first memory of music growing up?
At one point, my parents, for some ungodly reason, bought me a harmonica. I have no idea whose idea that was, but yeah, that was a dumb one. I don't know how old I would have been. But I remember just, playing harmonica, no idea what I'm doing, super loud because I'm like, 6 or whatever. And then I remember having to go in the closet in my room to play it because my parents just keep yelling at me for sitting there just like playing it as loud as I could for like hours on end. And then, of course, like the typical like banging on pots and pans and stuff. But yeah, I would have been pretty young. I don't really remember when that would have been.
Nice, man. Yeah, that's quite a dynamic instrument as well, isn't it? You can be very subtle and nuanced, but you can also like really go for it with a harmonica.
Yeah, and when you're like 6, that's all you do is just full beans the whole time. It's just like, how loud can I do this? And then of course, the really high pitch notes too. I'd sit there just like wailing on that for no real reason. But yeah, that was probably the first like actual memory. And then I remember playing guitar a little bit. My great grandpa was a guitar player and singer in a band back in the day, and we have one of his guitars still in my family. But I remember at one point, I don't know who would have bought it for me, but someone bought me one of those like little plastic toy guitars too. But I have no idea whatever happened to that. I'm sure I broke it in like 3 seconds.
That's amazing. And so, well, I mean, now you're known for kind of lots of like electronic stuff and synthesized sounds. So yeah, when did that kind of come into your consciousness? Synthesizer.
I don't know. I hated electronic music for a long time. I was definitely one of those like boomer kids of like, this isn't real music, man. Because when I was, my formative years and like a teenager drama queen, whatever, that was when Skrillex and a lot of that stuff really started to become popular. Trap and hip hop were really taking off on like mainstream radio. This would have been, like 2009, 2010, whatever. So I remember all that coming out. And I was all up to this time, I was like rock bands, guitar player. That was what I did. And eventually I kind of just got to a point where I'd been playing guitar so long by the time I was like a teenager that I kind of just felt myself getting bored of what I was doing. And I'm not like creative or inventive enough to like reinvent the way I approach the guitar. So I got into more like progressive stuff and some more experimental music. And eventually, I think it was probably bands like Animals as Leaders and Periphery, which that would have been you know, when like gent was cool back in the mid 2010s or so, or early 2010s. And that kind of sparked my curiosity with like exploring electronic elements within, you know, kind of the realm of music I was into at the time. And once I went to college for like a year, we had a MIDI class there. And I think that was probably one of the most interesting ones of like learning how MIDI worked and what it could do in Logic and whatever. So then I would go back to my dorm or my apartment, you know, and make a little kind of minimalist, not necessarily ambient, but like, you know, game loop compositions, like cracker music from, you know, people who used to pirate stuff, like keygen little doodles. So I kind of experimented with that, making these little loops and little ideas. And from there, I kept expanding, just with the stuff that was built into Cubase. And the built-in Cubase synths at that time weren't like great. They're still really hard to understand. But then I got FM8, and that was when I really started to dive into figuring it out, because, you know, I downloaded FM8 and played around with it, flicked through presets, thought that was super cool. And then it just became this like obsession of I need to understand why this sounds this way, which in hindsight was like the worst choice for a first synthesizer, because FM is complex enough, but like FM8 is a whole other level of like insanity.
Yeah,
But
I
from
think
there,
it's
yeah,
12,
that's when I
12
kept.
operators, isn't it? It's like quite a lot of layers to FM8.
Yeah,
Jonathan,
and
you
it
must
has
have
like,
used
you know, all the different waveforms, and every operator has like several different envelopes and stuff, and then it has like the effects chains and all this stuff. So that was, yeah, it was a big ask to like learn that. And of course, like the manual for it is like that thick, because it has to explain like everything about FM in like 700 pages. But from there, yeah, I kind of just kept progressing into like the world of electronic stuff and got more into the experimental side, and then eventually kind of pivoted as I got tired of like being in bands and playing shows and stuff. Because yeah, by the time I was like 22, I was just like, I'm too old for this.
Yeah, that's actually kind of along the lines of what I was going to ask for follow-up with. That was like, when did you know, when did your interest in doing this, like, was it coinciding with school? I also know I went black for a few seconds there, so you know, I had to rejoin. But you know, when did it start to coincide with actually, you know, working as opposed to experimenting and just kind of doing stuff? It sounds like you did live for a long time, and then you pivoted into
Yeah, I was in bands
production
and
music
stuff. That was like my whole
Right.
teenage years and like early 20s, which was just exhausting. I would never do that again. I can't stand performing live and all that. It's just not my thing. And, you know, and this being like the 2010s or whatever, the music business was already like over by this time. You know, like being in a band and making money on tour was a joke. So, yeah, I eventually got more into that. And as I got more into the production side, that was where I started to kind of work doing that stuff, and, you know, adding synth programming to different tracks for bands I was producing or whatever at the time. And then from there kept building, and then I wanted to explore it more on my own. And at this time, this was well before, you know, Splice and Loop Cloud or, you know, whatever services like that existed. So every time I needed, you know, drums or like basses or pads or whatever, I had to buy a sample pack, and a sample pack was like $40, $50, $60. And some of them, you know, were really expensive, you know, a couple $100 for some sample packs to use like, you know, one sound. There was like one good snare in this pack, and I had to pay $40 for it. So being, you know, basically a broke college kid at this time, I just kind of started experimenting with like, okay, you know, there was Seamless R, Virtual Riot was kind of coming on the scene at the time, and a lot of people showing, you know, making these modern sounds. So I was like, okay, I could do that. You know, like it's a sine wave with a pitch envelope. There's a kick drum. I could make that. And then, it was just this exponential growth from there of like either a need for something specific. So I kind of just had to figure out how to make it or do it, or just a want to like push myself a bit further. And then eventually, you know, it came like, okay, now if I can make these sounds, I could put these into sample packs and, you know, do all that, which kind of came later, because that was you know, that was totally starting from zero. Like all the experience I had up in music to that point was just totally irrelevant. So it was like, yeah, I don't know, a good 4 or 5 years of just constantly having to start from zero once I hit this new kind of phase of like what I was thinking of doing and all that. So yeah, a lot of goofing around too, you know, and eventually I was like, oh, maybe there's money in this, because there's sure not money playing live.
Oh, it's interesting. It's in yeah, I can relate to the idea of, you know, feeling it. not everybody would realize that there's a bit of, reinvention happening, inside of yourself, because to them it just looks like a music career, right, moving forward. But
Totally.
even what to people on the outside looks like a small granular shift can represent a pretty significant sea change, like in your thinking, and like you feel as though you have to reinvent yourself, fairly often. I think that can be kind of tricky,
Yeah, I think it's a part of like just learning to stay on top of it too, and figure out, where's the audience at, and where can I go from here, and what are people maybe not doing too. That's always been kind of a question I've looked at, of just like, what are people maybe missing that I can fill that gap, and then eventually, I just got super burnt out on music, because that was a lot of, I don't know, ridiculousness to deal with, managers and tours and labels, and like trying to figure out how to even make a basic living off of being in a band. Because even by the time I was in bands that were like marginally successful, like regional tours, playing festivals, stuff like that, you make $20,000-$30,000 a year, let's say, but you split all that up, everybody's only making 20,000, because we all got to put 10,000 back into, the tour van or the gear or whatever. And then you've got your apartment that's a rat box. And then you've got all your stuff you got to maintain. You need guitar strings, you need a new wireless unit. Oh, you need a new pedal. Oh, we need studio time. Oh, we need posters that we got to print. Oh, we got to get merch. So I just got super burnt out on all that, and just like quit music altogether for a couple years, and went into like web development and video work and stuff like that, and some like web programming things. And that was, I think, partially the impetus for like coming back to it with just a totally different mindset. Is just getting that perspective that like a corporate job provides, but then also learning that like I hate that and I'm not going to do that. Because I've always been very like, self-starter type. Like I was the kid that like, I mowed lawns. I started teaching guitar lessons to pay for my first car. I was always like trying to do my own thing. But after I got done with that, I felt like I had enough knowledge gained from just kind of soaking in information of like marketing, and what is the comms team doing, and how are we growing social media? What is our ad strategy? And kind of picking all this put me back in a position, I think, to market myself and really start monetizing sound design and things like that as a career, because it showed me, what makes a good portfolio, and what makes a good website, and what makes someone look like they know what they're doing enough to where they're going to be the person that gets the gig.
That's really interesting. Did you always consider yourself entrepreneurial, or was this sort of like a reluctant push into the self-starter entrepreneurial kind of kick? I know that as a musician, there's a little bit of it, but it sounds like, you started to explore another skill set and you realized, oh wait, like I have something really special here that I can work with.
I've always been more on the entrepreneurial side, for sure, of just, I don't like, working with others. I don't like having a job with a structure and all that. Like I really have always been, and like even as a kid, I was like pretty bad in school a lot of the times, because I would just get fixated on like one thing, and that's all I care about. As soon as, we're talking about like planets or like the galaxy or some weird thing in geometry class or whatever, that's all I focused on. So that's been, a pretty consistent thread throughout my life, is just I've always wanted to do things my way, on my own time, at my pace. And I really hate that typical structure, and just I don't know, all the unnecessary stuff that's attached with it. And, I've also been a pretty antisocial person like my whole life. So I really thrive just doing my own thing. But, I think it was a good lesson having a real job there for a bit, just to learn how a company works and get that kind of perspective on things, so I could apply that to what I wanted to do. And it was, to some degree, yeah, a push of like, you get your first job as a teenager in like McDonald's or whatever, right? And you're like, wow, this sucks. I don't want to be doing that the rest of my life. So this was kind of a taste of that on more of like a grown-up money and grown-up job scale. So it was a lot to walk away from, but I think, as much as I hated it and as much time as I feel like I wasted there, it was a necessary experience to figure out how to make the next couple moves. And then, that was where like my YouTube channel started and things like that, is just sort of another side project of something to work on before I went totally insane. And now, 5 years later or whatever, here we are.
Yeah, it's great to it's I completely relate to that feeling of transferable skills that you mentioned, you know, having a job that maybe isn't related to music, but you can take what you learned from that and that structure and that format and apply it to you like as a kind of mini business, you know, as like a freelancer or whatever. So I can really relate to that in my own life as well. I wanted to know about like your comfort zone, Cameron. Like, do you have a comfort zone in music making, and what's your view on getting out of that comfort zone?
Yeah, I think I don't remember where I got this from, but maybe a book or blog or something forever ago. But there's something which I actually want to make a video on. I don't know the name for it, but it's just the 104% rule. So there's this idea of like, I don't know, going to the gym, right? So my wife and I just got gym memberships a couple months ago, and we've been doing that again just because it's been too damn hot here to like go outside and go hiking. But if you go to the gym and you're lifting weights or whatever, or you're running on the treadmill, whatever you're doing, if you want to improve, you have to go beyond your comfort zone. But there's a point where it's just too much. You know, if I walk in and I try bench pressing like 400 pounds, I'm probably going to die. So if you go too far out of it, you know, there's nothing to gain from that other than failure. And then although failure can be valuable and give you a better perspective, sometimes you just fail too hard and it just screws the whole thing. So the 104% rule is this idea that you find that threshold where, you know, I got this. Like I could totally do this gig, this song, I could make this sound, whatever. But what's that extra thing that I could maybe challenge myself on? You know, what can make this a bit more interesting? Or what's like a feature of this synth I find myself avoiding a lot? Or what's, you know, just a new way of looking at this that I could push a little bit outside of that? And if you consistently give it that 104%, it's just across that threshold of like, you're going to gain something from it, but you're not going to be challenged too much to where it feels like this insurmountable, you know, goal or whatever. So I think that's been a big one for me, just to know my limits, but know how to push beyond them just enough to where it's going to be something interesting, you know, and it doesn't have to be this big thing. You know, sometimes it's about adding another 5 pounds on the weight rack. It's not like I need to, you know, double my squat game in 3 days. And I think a lot of that applies with music is, you know, where's this track at and what can I do to get this track done? And then going back, what are some things I could do to take it just that little bit further to make it, you know, really feel cool or different?
Yeah, that really does have that analogy of the ego lifter. You know, I love ego lifting memes and videos on Instagram. So some of my favorite content to watch when I'm feeling bad about myself is, you know, see somebody else fail, you know, when they're just lifting more than they can. But on a more serious note, yeah, I think I think there was a great Duke Ellington quote. Was it Duke Ellington? Maybe you would know, Cameron. It was something along the lines of like the gig, like the worst feeling for a musician is getting a gig that you're not prepared for, or there was some quote sort of along those lines. And yeah, I think that it's a finely tuned balance, you know what I mean? But I feel like getting work, you know, just getting one job, just getting one gig, you know, something like that really helps with that, because, you know, then you start to function within your gifts and, you know, have to learn new things, you know, for certain things. So I could see how it would be hard. Actually, that's one of the things I'm impressed about watching you work and watching the way that you educate people is, you know, the way that, you know, you're able to keep pushing and learning, it seems, you know, expanding the palette of what you're working on and like bringing that to the audience.
Oh, totally. I think that's a huge thing is like people don't realize is you're always learning. There's never this like magical, like, boop, level up. Like you win now, you know, music. Like,
yeah, exactly. But I think, you know, like you said, it's easy to get in there, but you know, it's cool that you have the pressure, I guess I would say, of an audience that wants to learn new things, because it probably gives you some intrinsic motivation to continue to also learning, because it's like, hey, you know, I got this awesome community of people that are sort of to some degree relying on me to, you know, to help push them to the next level too. And I think that almost, you know, I might be assuming or reading too much into it, but I would presume that there's some sort of a mutual symbiotic sort of, you know, appreciation for the audience and the creator yourself, you know, through this process.
Yeah, I think it's a big thing because there's always like, you know, and it comes back to that 104% rules. It's always just, how can I improve a little bit on the last thing? And, you know, I think YouTube over time, it's been a great challenge is, you know, not only an educator, but as a sound designer, because, you know, when I look at these things, if I'm going to teach them, the only way I feel comfortable teaching something or sharing something is if I feel like I could explain this to, like, you know, my 7-year-old nephew. And if I can't do that, I'm probably not qualified to talk about it. But from there, you know, how can I improve my delivery? How can I make this video better? How can I improve the cinematography? How can I improve the lighting? How could I improve the edit? You know, what is going to turn this into a story rather than just another, you know, guy on YouTube rattling on about saw waves or something. And yeah, I think there's a duty there, but it's also an encouraging thing, because I love that the community around my channel, typically at least, is so open, you know, and like I love doing these viewer track streams I do every so often, of listening to just what the community of my channel is making. And it's so interesting because it gives me a lot of other ideas and a lot of other perspective, because sometimes, you know, it's someone making like rock songs or like vocal, you know, kind of summery pop things, or like super dark, deep OG dubstep. And it's a cool thing. And it gives me a lot of range to explore. And it allows me to keep learning of, you know, if I'm going to teach this, how is this going to be applicable to someone who like does not care about, you know, wub wub basses or whatever. And I think that's been a thing that's really helped my channel lately. And that's been a big part of kind of the new direction I'm planning on taking the channel once I'm sort of done with my little rest period here, to, you know, explore not only what a YouTube music tube tutorial video can be, but what a piece of educational content can be, and what that can explore and how it's structured. So I think that should be kind of fun.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'd love to hear, excuse me.
That's why you gotta have the tea ready.
Yeah, right. Any perceived failures that you've had along the way, have you been able to turn them into opportunities, not only to learn for yourself, but maybe to show other people? Like, has it been anything that you've been able to showcase out to people? Because I know with, you know, creation and creators, sometimes they can get in their head about a failure, but they don't realize that that can sometimes be one of the biggest points and where they can learn, or, you know, a mistake turns into the best part of a song or a sound design, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. One time my dad and I were down in Nashville, you know, before Nashville sucked. We were down on, I think we were down near Broadway somewhere. We went to this little bar, and little acoustic setup, you know, one guy guitar and his buddy, you know, backing him up or whatever. And the guy just put on this horrible show. I mean, he was a good singer, a good player, whatever, but just an asshole, like horrible stage presence, just seemed super entitled to the room and whatever. And I remember leaving that place with my dad, and, you know, I was like, dude, that sucked. And he was like, well, you know, if all else, you learned what not to do. And that's always been something that's really stuck with me, of like, you know, and this is stuff like people for some reason on YouTube never talk about. Like, I'm just like a lot of the other people out there doing sound design or whatever. I've been fired. I've been kicked off gigs. I've screwed things up. I've had revision lists longer than you would believe, of just like, nope. But yeah, I mean, it has to be a growing experience, and it has to be something that you learn to reframe. Like, you can't look at failure as failure, because if you do that, it's always a discouraging thing, and it always means you did something wrong. But, you know, what's the quote, you know, someone on Tumblr probably made up, of Edison, of I found 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. So, you know, eventually it's just all a numbers game, whether it's sound design, music, any other creative field, or, you know, even doing your job of whatever thing you're doing. If you make enough bad things, eventually a good thing has to come up. And through that process, it just becomes harder to make more bad things. You know, you establish what worked, what didn't work, and it makes you kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture of something, of like, okay, why do they feel this way? Not just taking it as a direct criticism of, you know, these wavetables are not good. Okay, you know, why? And then, you know, I might play with them or whatever and go, oh, yeah, you know, if I'm making a sound with these, maybe it could feel a bit bassier. Like, yeah, you know, that should be more like vocal or whatever. And it's not that I did anything bad or like objectively wrong. It just might not be the right fit. And I think that's a really hard thing for creative people to understand, is that failure is not equal to rejection. You know,
it's so important. Yeah, man, I was just listening to a podcast yesterday with what was this guy? I can't remember his name, but it was an interview with an athlete, like an athletic coach, used to be super famous runner when he was in his teens, like top 3 and the number 1 for some other, something like the shortest mile or something in the US. And, he was talking about how in sports, people who get really deep in on something at a young age and it's like they're everything, it's much harder for those people to, go through, constructive criticism and stuff like that, because their identity is so tied to their craft. Right. And I feel like as artists, very similar feeling, but something you said really resonated with me, is that, criticism is something, that you shouldn't take personally. But, I talked to a therapist one time about this, and, it was really interesting, her perspective, because she said, if you answer criticism, and this was about self-criticism, but in general, if you can respond to criticism with curiosity, that's a really easy to implement strategy for basically getting out of the idea of like, coming down on yourself or getting super depressed or really worn out, by feedback and stuff like that. Because, she was explaining to me about how, look, John, like everybody experiences the stuff that you're going through, right? But the way that but not everybody internalizes it the way that you do. Not everybody feels attacked the way that you do. So you have to ask yourself, how is it in the way that I'm responding to this criticism, or that I'm responding to this failure, or perceived failure, and transforming it into something that can negatively impact, your output and your creative, inspiration moving forward. So, it's nice to hear that you've been through similar journeys there, and that's what I hear in what you're saying, is that, you learn to respond to negative feedback with curiosity, as opposed to, hurt feelings and something that's actually going to derail you. That's not easy to do. I think that's a lesson that it takes time to learn that, not everybody gets there.
Yeah. One of the things my wife tells me all the time when I'm bitching and moaning about whatever, YouTube video didn't do well or whatever, she always she's like, you're not that special and it's not that big of a deal. And I was showing her a song the other night. I've been on this kind of like music break for a while, working on some tracks and whatever. And I was just totally stuck on this song. I was on a pretty good pace of like a song every 2 days. And I had this one that just wasn't working, kind of reframed it, retooled it, built a couple parts up, scrapped some stuff, and put something back together. I was like, okay, I think this is good. And I played it back to her, and, she's trying to read. I'm like, can you just listen to this for a sec? No, just 1 sec. Trust me. Just hear me out. And she just looks at me and just goes, just be proud of what you've made. And I think that's a big thing. Your problems aren't that big of a deal. You're not that interesting. You're really not that special. And whatever you made is probably fine. It's such a hard thing for creative people to do, because, I think any creative field, it's established by people who are just chronic overthinkers and overanalyzers and always stuck with just this thing of like analysis paralysis, where you can't move forward because you're stuck like in this very myopic look at what is happening now. One thing I learned really early on, which is kind of funny, not a big religious person or whatever, but when I was really young, went to Sunday school, what it's called, right? Or Bible study, whatever. Didn't have a Bible, didn't have anything. It was like my first time at this. And the teacher, preacher, I don't know. What is someone who teaches Sunday school called? Whatever.
Sunday school teacher.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever. So the lady, she walks around the room handing out straws, and immediately I'm like, 7 years. I'm like, kind of like cult level shit is this? Like, what are we doing here? Why do we have straws? And she says, pick up the straw. Okay. Look through the straw. And, I'm curious. All right. I'll bite. Look through the straw. And I'm just like, okay, this is a huge waste of time. And she said, this is the way that you're looking at your life. And she says, now take the straw away. And, this is how God wants you to see your life or whatever. And that was an idea that was, printed in on my brain pretty early on. And I'm glad that was the thing, because that's always stuck in the back of my mind of like, whenever I get too focused on something, it's just like, it's that straw thing. You just got to like zoom out for a sec, like shut up, think about it, big picture. Does this matter? Is this right? Is anyone going to care in like 5 years if I make this decision or not?
Yeah, that's such a good point. I'm like, all right, interview done. Let's all go home and just kind of think about that point for, let me get the Starbucks straw and take a look. By the way, Brian Garlick said he's super special, so I just want to acknowledge
Oh,
Brian
yep.
publicly in front of
Very,
everybody here.
very special, Brian.
I'll just have a round of applause for Brian. Brian, you're special. Send me a DM and I'll send you something to make you feel more special. That sounds a little
That's
sketchy,
sweet.
but it's not sketchy, I promise.
Speaking of which,
It's a pipe bomb.
all right, so here's today's question for our giveaway. For those of you who want to enter the contest to get a t-shirt and get some stickers from GPU Audio, go to our Discord. There is a section called AMA questions. You could put your answer there. So the question this week is, what is Venus Theory's most popular YouTube video? So you're probably going to have to go to his YouTube and search for his most popular video, put the name
And
of
it's
it.
probably not the one you expect either. It pisses me off that it is the most popular one. It really does.
Oh, we hit a sore spot. I love it.
That's a whole other rant for a whole other day. But this isn't the
Totally.
Cameron Whines About YouTube show. That's on my channel, so you can subscribe for that.
There you go. A nice plug. Well, we are about just a little over 30 minutes in, and I'd love to start getting to some of our audience questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
So to start with, Alan asked, how did the name Venus Theory come to be? Great question.
Yeah, I was in a bunch of bands before, and then I was like trying to find a new project or whatever. And originally Venus Theory was me and my wife. So part of it was just like men are from Mars, women are from Venus, har, 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 stupid pun, but it just sounded like fitting for a more like electronic project. But another part of it was I watched this really weird conspiracy theory video thing when I was, like a teenager on the weird side of the internet, probably on like Newgrounds or whatever, back when those were a thing. And there was this really weird video about how like all the planets are Earth at different stages. So, Venus was Earth when it first formed and whatever. Mars is Earth like after some kind of nuclear apocalypse, whatever. So it was really weird. And yeah, I just thought that was an interesting name, But yeah, nothing too particularly insightful or special.
Oh, Jess,
Mike
you're
is
muted.
muted.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, that dang mute button. Paul asked, how long was it before you started being happy with your own productions? It's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah, I don't think I'm ever happy with it. I feel like there's always something I can improve on or always something new I could do. I think, to get to a point where I felt like I was able to produce at like a commercially acceptable level of like, if someone hired me to make a song or like mix a song or whatever, and I could charge like a reasonable amount of money for it, that was probably, I don't know, maybe a good 10 years or more of just really trying to understand everything about, production or whatever. And of course, like I'm still learning stuff all the time. There's always a new technique or always a new way to do things. And yeah, I think it took probably a good 10 years before I felt like I could make a commercial viable product for like a client or whatever, whether it's me mixing and doing whatever, or me writing and producing something. But I think the point where I started to be happier with what I was making, outside of the commercial realm, on just like, the idea of like artistic fulfillment, was more in understanding that like you are the person that determines the goalpost and you are the person that has the final say and nobody can really tell you otherwise. You listen to like early garage rock from the 60s or whatever, it sounds like trash. Black metal stuff is super poorly produced by any standards. And even like, early hip hop or, stuff from like the 2000s that now sounds super dated or whatever. Whenever you as the artist assign a finished, name and whatever to the track, that is what it is. And that is the highest form of the art. Could you improve on it? Sure. But you'll probably do that on your next song or on your next record. So that was probably the thing that took me the longest to learn. And that's really only been in the last, handful of years. And I've been doing this stuff for a long time now. So yeah, that's probably the big takeaway, is just learning to understand that, you have the final say. And if you feel it sounds good and you feel that that's what your audience wants, go for it. The rest, the technical stuff, no one actually cares. Like I can't name a time I've been in a conversation with a listener, end listener of something that's been like, oh, I wish they would use this mic or something. So that's like, nobody cares. They just want like a good song.
I can really tell that you were, using the, like going on about the preamps that you're using or something like that. And nobody talks about that. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Or Chris.
Oh, go on. I was just going to ask a very generic question, but it's an interesting one because we get to talk about like the gear and the stuff. So yeah, Cameron, if you were on like a fictional desert island and you have a small amount of gear to take with you and you have like an electric supply there, yeah, what would you take with you? What's like essential for you?
Obviously discounting like a computer, audio interface of some kind, microphone, a MIDI controller. And if I got to bring a synth, I'd probably just bring like the Iridium because it does like everything.
Oh, the Waldorf Iridium, yeah, great synth.
Yeah, I mean, and that's actually a video I'm working on next is just like what you actually need to make music, and it's stupid these days. Like if you have a MIDI control, you don't even need an audio interface really. Like you only need that if you want to record or have like an ASIO driver or whatever. But yeah, with like a mildly powerful computer or even a tablet. I watched a video the other day of someone making a beat on it was like an iPad Air. And like the stuff you can do on that is insane.
No, it's wild. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, with a computer, a MIDI controller, audio interface, and a microphone, you can make a record. So I think it's really all you would need. I don't think I wouldn't need anything else. I would want to have other things, sure. But like if I had to sit down, gun to my head and make a song, I could do it with, laptop, MIDI controller, interface, and like one mic to maybe get some fun samples or something.
Yeah. Was it Fortet? Was it Fortet who did that shot of this is what I used to make
on like Instagram or something? Like this is what I made the latest record with, and it was like 3 things.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I love that stuff. Well, and you also think about on a desert island, you're probably not going to be streaming. You won't have an audience, so really, you're just playing for yourself at that point anyway, right? So what makes you happiest, I think, but not to try to get all philosophical on a dumb analogy. That's kind of what I like to do. I think. Yeah, we got some other cool questions here. Someone said yeah to the Iridium video. Yeah, that'd be dope. Okay, let's see.
Yeah,
scrolling through. Jess. You got
Alan asked, what do you think was the most important factor in your social media growth and success?
I think part of it was just trying to look at like the larger meta of YouTube as a platform at the time. So like, and I mean, I assume we're talking about YouTube because that's like my most popular platform because I don't really care about other social media at all, which I need to get better about. But yeah, I think when I started YouTube, which was around 2017-ish or something like that, I think, there were channels like Sadawick, Seamless R, Virtual Riot had gotten pretty big at that time. I think Ricky Tinez had just started, Ben Jordan had just started, and there was just this sort of shift in what YouTube was. So when I started YouTube, I did the same thing like all my favorite channels did, like Seamless or whatever. It was me and a webcam and a DAW, and I'm just like rambling on about like phase coherence and like stuff no one cares about. So that worked. And there is an audience for that type of content, but it's super nichey. And when you get into these more advanced topics, the thing is the people that know what these topics are to even search for them to begin with probably don't need you to teach it to them. And it really just becomes this like echo chamber, not like boys club, but just like, this group of people who know about this thing. So we all sit here and go like, ha, 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 ha. Smart. So, watching Ricky Tinez, Ben Jordan, some of these other channels and what they were doing at that time, it was a bit more interesting. It was a little higher production quality, a little bit of a different take on what a music tube video is or like what a synth demo is or whatever. And Loopop had just come on, maybe a year after I did, or maybe right around the same time. And there was just this total shift in what YouTube could be. So I think once I figured that out, I started pushing a bit more into my own direction and growed the channel, just doing what worked until I got to a point where it was like sustainable. So from there, again, kind of looking through the straw moment, zooming back out, okay, what am I doing that makes me worth watching? And that's something I really struggle with now. And that's why I really quit doing a lot of like product demos and stuff is, when the latest and greatest thing comes out, whatever it is, I know that I and 20 other influencer people are going to get this exact same thing. It's going to have the exact same features, exact same specs, exact same presets, exact same capabilities. So what's the point in me making that video? Really not one. So I think the real growth factor became trying to insert a bit more of myself and my take on things and trying to bring something unique to the table and build an audience around the idea that, you know, as egotistical as it sounds, just an audience that's interested in what I have to say on something or my take on something. And once I had that, you know, it's kind of like music, right? If I want to be Skrillex or Stevie Ray Vaughan or whatever, I could buy all their gear and do all the stuff. I could play the song note for note or make it exactly as it was, and it's never going to sound like them. So I think it was the same thing with YouTube, is trying to find my own voice and my own style, not only in the editing and the cinematography, but the delivery, the subject matter and stuff like that. And really trying to push out of not doing the exact same thing and giving people a reason to watch what I'm doing and, you know, try and take a different approach with it, which is what I'm going to really be leaning in going forward. Because I think we're at a point now where MusicTube is sort of shifting again. And I think it's a good opportunity for me to sort of exit that sphere a bit more and build my own little orbital path, you know, on the different plane, I guess, and not have to do like the exact same thing everyone else is doing, because that's exhausting. And it's not creatively interesting or challenging either, you know, like to make a synth review or a plugin demo or whatever. It's the same video 100 other people are going to make. So, you know, why should I give you a reason to watch?
That's a great point. You know, the corporate interests don't always align with your artistic interests. You know what I mean? And like, you know, your effort to monetize, but then heavy corporations realizing that this is also an opportunity, they tend to turn things into assembly lines. You know what I mean? So it runs the risk of, you know, homogenizing the community of creators. Like, you know, because first and foremost, you're a creator, right? Like you're a musician, you're a composer, sound designer, you do things, and you want to, you know, you have an audience of people that want to get inside what you do. Not necessarily view you the same way that a corporation would view you, as like a marketing, you know, vector.
Exactly.
You know what I'm
and
saying?
I think that's part of it too, is like, and that's why I really like channels like Ben Jordan or, you know, channels like that as well, because I think that's been the X factor, is like being someone who has actual experience and actual credits in this industry. I think was another thing that really set me apart from like other YouTube channels who, you know, like they're great producers or songwriters or whatever, but they haven't really like done stuff. So I think that authority factor has also really helped grow my channel, but also give me a lot of experience and a lot of stuff I can talk about that's unique and other people can't talk about because they haven't done it. You know what I mean? So I think that's been a really valuable thing too. And it's like, as much as I complain about having this weird dichotomy in what I do, it all feeds back into the larger loop of like why I do what I do, you know?
Yeah, man, definitely. And I think having those professional achievements that you do have as well, it's kind of, it gives you a sense of self-assuredness, which maybe some of the other YouTube channels you can kind of sense that they don't have when they are like producing a track. Yeah, there's definitely, I think there's definitely some examples of that for sure.
Definitely.
Oh, go on.
Oh yeah, I was going to say Paul Eubanks asked a question here. Jesse, mind if I read it?
No, go for it.
Okay, it says, what are some pitfalls or time wasters you'd caution new producers to avoid? Paul Eubanks.
The internet.
I was going to say, how
really
about
common ones, I guess. You know, don't work for free ever. Like, don't ever do what you're good at for free. I saw there was a Twitter thread on this the other day about like, especially, you know, YouTube channels of like companies send you gear and expect you to do a video for free. And it's like, if you invested all this time and all this editing software, cameras, lighting, you know, you're a video production agency. So why are you doing it for free? And I think it's the same thing of, you know, there is something to be said for getting your name out there, but I think that's more done on like a low key level, like getting your feet wet in the idea of like making your first sample pack or something. Put that on Reddit. You know, you can use it as a growth strategy, but it's more important where if you're doing work for somebody else, you should get paid. It regardless, you know, if it's $20, you should get paid for your time because you're worth more than just like experience. Because I can tell you right now, experience is not worth a whole hell of a lot when it comes to like paying rent. Yeah, I think other really common pitfalls, obviously, you know, trying to sound too much like your influences. You're never gonna do that. Like I talked about, Stevie Ray Vaughan as an example. If I bought the guitar, the amp, the pedals, whatever, played it note for note, not going to sound like a Stevie Ray song. It's going to sound like the Walmart version of Stevie Ray. And I don't want to do that. And if that's your goal, is to sound as good as whoever, it's always going to make you unhappy, because you're never going to get there, because by nature, they're always going to be one step ahead of you at being themselves, because they're pushing themselves, roping into that 104% rule, I guess. They're constantly innovating on what they're doing, and you're just following that. There's a point where you got to break off and learn to do your own thing and be comfortable with it. It might not sound like that, but in the end, that's kind of the point,
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I mean, just typical stuff of trying to stick too much into one thing. Maybe you're really into making dubstep or whatever, but like, go make a lo-fi hip hop track, or go make a Latin house beat or whatever. Like, try something. Statistically, it's going to be bad, but you might learn something from it, and I think that's a thing anymore with like, marketing is, as an artist, you have to do this one thing. And I think there is some truth to that, but you're never going to be able to grow out of that and, blossom and branch out into something better if you're just staying in that one lane constantly.
Definitely. Tronics A asked, were you referencing the cinematic chords video earlier?
Oh, I think that's the most popular video answer. Yep.
Yes.
Oh, cool. So did cinematic chords win or no?
Yeah,
we'll have to check our Discord.
Yeah,
Oh,
I have to
okay.
check the Discord.
Yeah, well, we'll check the time. We'll
can't
check the
say.
timestamp, guys. We'll see what happens.
Richard asked, how the hell do I organize my giant random assortment of sounds so I don't spend so much time going through them?
Great question.
Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of different I have my network attached storage and other stuff, but I'm pretty picky about like sorting things into the right files. But I think the Waves Cosmos sample manager is kind of cool, because it detects like melodic stuff, which some of the other sample managers don't. But yeah, there's like, I think XO by Output, or not Output, XO by Excellent Audio, I think is it. There's plugins like that do kind of analyze your stuff and make it a bit more sortable. I'm always of the mindset of like, you should have your files structured nicely on your computer, because it makes it easier to navigate. But that's also like, that's the way I have things set up. And if I had to do that from scratch, I would probably just use one of those tools instead, because that would be a nightmare to try and organize, the terabytes worth of random stuff I have floating around on my system. But yeah, that's probably the best way to like manage samples anymore, is one of those like AI analyzer things. Because otherwise, yeah, you're going to sit there going through a folder of like, dunk, dunk, dunk. Okay, that's like a hip hop kick drum. That's like a trap one. That's like a dubstep one. And that's a massive waste of time.
Totally.
Yeah,
Paul,
I was going to say, yeah, those things are interesting. Like Splice is
Mhm.
new. So, oh, sorry, Jess. We had
No, go
some
ahead.
latency over here. Yeah, there's this new Splice platform, that helps you kind of sift through all of those samples. It's kind of cool. But yeah, go ahead, Jess.
Paul also asked, what was the last song or album you heard that really blew you away? Something you felt really moved the needle?
The last song or album. Let's see. I found an artist the other day. I can't remember their name actually. Let me pop into the old internet history here. Unknown Reality. There's an album called Gaia, and that was pretty cool. I like that one. Unknown Reality's got some really, really cool stuff. Seb Taylor from Kaya Project had Ice, Dust, and Gears, which was a really cool release. That one was kind of a fun one to listen to. And then I was listening to what was it? The soundtrack to The Village again. There's a YouTube channel, Tom LJ White, who mentioned that like The Village is one of those film soundtracks that's like horribly underrated because the movie sucked so bad. And that's actually a really good soundtrack. Yeah, I like that one a lot. But yeah, the Unknown Reality, that's probably been one of the ones that was really like, oh, that's cool. And that was one of those ones of like, I want to do that.
So inspiring also.
Yeah, exactly.
So we got time for one more question. Paul also asked, what is the future of sound design? So where do you
That's
feel like you see it going?
It was like the broadest, hardest question of all, right?
Just a quick
We'll
one for
end
the
on
end.
that
Yeah.
one.
We're gonna end it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think when you look at like the innovative sound design stuff lately, like color bass was kind of a interesting one, taking a dubstep bass through a vocoder with a big polyphonic, chord stack, modulating it and whatever. I don't think there's really a future for sound design. I think it's just going to be whatever takes off at that time in like the popular genre. But the future of sound design is heavily going to be relying on the innovation of like the DAW and plugins and what synths can do and things like that, and how people are going to push those or try and work around whatever limits we're facing at the time. But I think if there had to be some futuristic take on what sound design is going to be, I think it's like a lot of stuff music based and art based. I think it's going to come down to AI tools and deep learning stuff and things like that. And especially as computers get more powerful, or GPU audio, being able to harness the power of something like way more ridiculously powerful than a CPU. This stuff that was off limits now, of like really advanced spectral resynthesis or things like that are just way too computationally expensive to do in real time.
Right. Yeah.
Suddenly that becomes accessible. So like that's the future of sound design. It's not going to make sounds on its own. It's going to still come down to people to do that. But I think like AI and tools like that are going to be what's next, because I think Dune 3 from Synapse Audio, they released an update where there's this thing called genetics, where you can pick I think like up to 5 presets within the preset browser. Any 5 will do, and then you hit the genetics button or mutate or whatever it says, and it'll combine characteristics from all of those to make a new patch, and you can tweak from there. And I think if that became more intelligent, that's where things are going to go. Is like I could envision a future where plugins or synthesizers, you feed it a handful of presets and say, I like, this bass and this bass and this bass, but I need a bass for my track. So, go, and it'll spit out either an interpolation or kind of a different take with, what that could be. I think it might even be something like, if anyone's familiar with the software Mandelbulber.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's a randomization engine in there where you seed it, and then it gives you like 20 different choices of like, here are some variations on this. And I think that might be the future of sound design is, you give a DAW or a plugin or whatever it is, a handful of ideas, and it gives you like, a list of here's like 20 possible ways you could expand on this. And, I think that would be the tool. And especially as ARA technology becomes more prominent, where channels within a DAW can communicate with each other, maybe that's where it goes as well. As I need a kick drum, right? So it'll look at all the other elements of your song, the keys, the bass, the lead, the vocal, analyze all the frequency content and say the ideal kick drum sound would be this, like to complement what's going on. This is what you should do. So maybe that's where all that will go.
Yeah, I think it is going there in a lot of ways. I do get concerned about it a little bit though too, because I do think it runs the risk of homogenizing creativity, because of algorithmically speaking, there's a particular solution, for a particular audio problem. Then it's like it could result in like, forcing a genre, right? Whereas like, you might be less likely to experience the happy accidents that make so many records so great, or so many other things possible.
I think that gets into the big debate of AI, doesn't it? Of just like, Mid-Journey or whatever, right? What is the role of a visual artist now? Or like, some of the I don't know if anyone's listened to it, but there's like AI networks that like they were like, make a Nickelback song, and it's like some guitars and there's just a vocal, or like make an Eminem song, and it spits out a semblance of it. But I think within that space there's always going to be something said about the human approach and the human touch to it, because it's going to be imperfect. But I think people are afraid of AI in that it's always going to be like ahead of us or whatever, and it's going to outsmart us. But even if AI becomes theoretically perfect, there's always going to be a market for like the human version, like as powerful as like the Iridium is, right? Like we should all have an Iridium by any standard. It's stupid powerful. It has all the features and things. It does like anything you could possibly think of. So why the hell would I want a monophonic analog synth?
because it's about the experience.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And I think
Yeah.
that's going to be part of it. As afraid of as people are of AI, I think AI is ultimately going to be an enabling tool and not something that's going to steal my job. You know, I think it's something that gives me an idea or a prompt, or you know, maybe I'm stuck on a chord progression. Now I have a tool that could help me, and that's great. Like, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's always going to be something that, you know, the human aspect is going to bring to it, despite the fact that, you know, and I think Ben Jordan might disagree with me, but you know, ultimately as a musician, as an artist, as a whatever, given enough training and enough of a data set, like, a computer could sound exactly like you. I fully believe that. Like, if you had a smart enough AI algorithm and system, I could feed it some Venus Theory tracks or whatever, and it would make my next song for me. Some people are going to ride that train, of course, you know, like people using Mid-Journey and like selling it or whatever.
Right.
But, you know, there's always going to be room for me to do my own thing. And I don't think it has to be a competition. I think it's just kind of two flavors of the same cat, so to speak.
Yeah.
Good point.
You know, I don't think it's something to be afraid of. I think it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, totally. I think it depends. I think also the, you know, the impetus, if artists don't want to be replaced. I mean, because there are people out there that want like the computer to do the composition, to do the entire production. But I also think what it does is it gives us the opportunity to sort of define boundaries between the industry of what's a creative piece and then what's like a utilitarian, you know, use case for sound and audio. So for instance, if certain marketing things or certain, you know, audio utilities like, you know, ambience for, you know, corporate environments and things like that were generated by an AI, that, you know, it actually sometimes forming a boundary would actually allow, even if in the short term it hurts the music industry, who cares, because the music industry needs to be reformed anyway. It might actually, you know, it might actually push artists in the direction of finding a way to, you know, create a new structure that's actually going to benefit them more in the long run. But yeah, getting back to your earlier point, and Jess, I know we're a little over time today, but you know, getting back to the compute issue, I think the future of, you know, how quickly AI and other technologies kick off really does depend on compute, you know, and like where we're going to be able to move that, you know, how we're going to be able to process it. So obviously GPU audio has a vested interest in that, you know, just because we want to you know, provide the processing foundation for it, you know what I mean, for everybody to make stuff. But yeah, somebody mentioned here, I'm building a new system for this. Oh, this is the GPU audio question. Okay. Yeah.
We'll get
cheap
to those
stuff that
questions.
you can get out.
Yeah. If you guys have questions specifically for GPU audio, you can go to the Discord. But we are out of time, and we definitely want to say thank you to Venus Theory. We don't want to take up any more of your time. I'm sure you're very busy.
Thanks, Cameron.
Yeah, I gotta start cleaning. This room's a wreck right now.
For those of you who want to find Venus Theory, I assume they can just search you on YouTube, right?
Yep. You'll probably find me.
And with that is another GPU audio live stream. You can join us here again on YouTube next week with Jeremy from Red Means Recording.
Sweet.
And then the following week, we will be talking more about our contest coming up that Jonathan mentioned at the beginning of this stream. So thank you guys again for joining us. Thanks for all the questions, the comments. This has been fantastic.
Yep. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thank you, Cameron. Thanks, Chris. Jane. Thanks, Jonathan. And I'll see you guys again next week.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Cool. Thanks,
See you
Jess.
soon.